Well, according to a new report, ageism in the workplace starts at 45 years old. This is according to the Institut du Quebec, and this is sounding the alarm bells for people over the age of 45. And with this study comes many revelations about the level of debt Quebecers are facing in their early 50s, how it is 3 times higher than it was 20 years ago. What does this all mean? Souleima El-Achkar, who is the senior economist with the Institut du Quebec and co-author of the study, is joining us now. Souleima, thank you so much for taking the time.
Thanks for having me.
Okay, so there's so many things here because, I'm 44 years old. To me, 45, 44, this still feels young. And looking at these numbers and realizing that you're already, like, if you're heading out on the workforce, you have a harder time at that age in particular, that's kind of shocking. Do you know if this has always been the case, or is this something new?
Well, just maybe to give a bit of context. So, as you know, we have an aging population in Quebec. So there's been a lot of efforts in the last few years to make people stay in employment longer, to bridge some of the shortages that we have in the labor market and so on. And what we realized is that this decision of when do we retire, it's something that we start. It's a reflection that starts early on in the mid career, at like around in our 40s and our 50s, and it's a very multidimensional issue. So it depends on so many factors, like our physical health, our financial health, and so on. How well we are in the in our employment, how fulfilled we feel, etc. So it's really a very multi-layered reflection, and the decisions that we make, in our mid-career, they kind of shape our trajectory in what we call this like second half time of our professional life, and ultimately, it affects our retirement age and so on.
Wow.
So we did. Yes. So we one thing that we see also, so we do see that in general, people in Quebec are more in debt, as you said. The value of the debt has tripled since 2005 until now, and there's about 55% of people aged 45 to 54-year-old who still have mortgage loans. So that percentage was only 38% in 2005. So here there's, the housing prices have gone up, so we have more financial, responsibilities and so on. There's also the fact that all our careers are a bit delayed because we study on average a bit longer. We enter the labor market a little bit later, sorry. So there's a lot of factors that have to do with it.
Yeah, it's interesting, Souleima, because I was looking at your study that your group put together, and it also links up with another study that I've been talking about quite a bit from the Montreal Economic Institute that basically said that Quebec is the last province in terms of social mobility in the country, meaning that social mobility in this case means that we would hope to have more than our parents had, right? And your study sort of almost paints the same picture, is that you mentioned right there the debt, that the numbers have tripled, right? So what does that mean now for Quebec workers? Because this is alarming. I mean, when you put together these numbers, what is the part of this study that most affects you or concerns you?
Yeah, well, maybe we can. So that's true that when we look at the debt figures, it is alarming in the sense of we are a lot more indebted, etc. But we also, our wealth has also increased. It's not all negative. The picture is not all negative. So we have to also think about that. The quality of employment in general has improved. We've made some progress. This is also why we're working for more years. Our health has also improved. So there's less and less people leaving their employment for health reasons, even if it's still a factor. So 26% of retirees in Quebec say that they would have liked to work longer if it wasn't for health issues. But so there's some progress. It's not necessarily a very grim picture. But what we wanted to point to is there are real issues that start at around the age of 45. And I agree with you, it's really early. For example, for ageism, what we saw is that ageism begins quite much earlier than we think. So there are employers who are reluctant to hire people aged 45 and over, especially for positions linked that have any kind of technological content, because they see them as less able to adapt to new technologies and so on. But in reality, these same employers, when they do hire older workers, they say, oh, actually, they're just as competent, if not more competent, than younger hirees. So there's a lot of ageism at play. And at the same time, studies have shown that this professional mobility is important. So when people do change career, do change their jobs at mid-career on a voluntary basis, like not if they're laid off, but if they do have a career change, then they're more likely to still be working in their 60s and to be engaged in the labor market. So mobility is important, but at the same time, there is a challenge to the mobility of people after 45.
And do we know, Souleima, if there are other factors at play? Is gender a factor, for example? Do women have a harder time over 45, or is it harder for men, or is it across the board we're looking at the same picture?
We identified a lot of different gender gaps, for sure, and we find that holds throughout your career. So us women in general, we have more career interruptions. We're more likely to work less hours and all that. And what that does is over time means our work time is more limited, means our contributions, for example, to our retirement savings and so on is lower. So that translates into like more precarity at an older age. So there's these different gender gaps that are, that persist. And at mid-career, an interesting thing that we found is that, now women in Quebec, women 45 years and over, have caught up with men in terms of education. So about 25% of women now have a bachelor's degree or more, which is the same as for men, whereas only 40 years ago it was only 4%. So there's a great progress that came with our education, with our labor market participation. But at the same time, though, this glass ceiling still seems to be there, because even if women 45 and over now represent 46% of the workforce, they only hold 34% of higher management roles. So there's still that effect at play.
And we're running out of time, but I do want to ask you this in terms of, because you talked about that debt accumulation that is much larger now than it's ever been, you said than 20 years ago, right? Is that in specific industries? Is it like people who work in, I don't know, tech? Is it people who work in construction? Is it across the board that everyone is just more in debt? The workers are more in debt.
We didn't really look at that aspect to see who exactly is in debt. It's more like the median. It's the value of the median debt that we're talking about. So, but what we do know is that a lot of this, the increase in value, is linked to the increased prices of real estate. That's for sure.
Wow.
And that the share of people who are still paying, because 40 years ago, when you're in your 40s and your 50s, you had your kids were older and maybe out of the house. You had paid already your mortgage. Now we're in the situation where we're still, still paying these loans, and a lot of times we call it the triple charge of the sandwich generation. We're still juggling between our kids who still need us, our aging parents, our jobs, and we have these pressures, financial pressures also. So.
Wow. It's a lot. It's a lot, Souleima. It's a lot. And it's really interesting because you mentioned having a mortgage. Some people can't even afford to get the house now. A really interesting study. Again, Souleima El-Achkar is a senior economist with the Institut du Quebec and the co-author of this study, this interesting study that really looks at how ageism in the workplace starts at 45 and all the other social pressures, financial pressures around it as well. Souleima, thank you so much for taking the time, and have a happy weekend.
Thanks a lot. Happy Thanksgiving weekend.
You too. Take care.
Bye.
Unmistakably Canadian.
It's the music that raised you.
The artists raising the bar.
Hi, this is Bryan Adams.
Hey, my name's Brett Emmons. I'm from the Glorious Sons.
Hi, I'm Nelly Furtado.
Made in Canada. The station that champions Canadian music.
Loud, proud, and all yours.
No passports required. Just press play.
Tap into Made in Canada now on iHeartRadio.ca
Or the free iHeartRadio app.